What if the most powerful creatures in the world were looking for one person, and everyone around him worked together to make sure they never found him? Not because he was dangerous, not because he was a criminal, but because the truth about who he really was would break everything they had built. This is the story of a boy who cleaned stables, a boy who was told he was worthless, a boy who was hidden from the ancient dragons for 17 years. And here is the shocking part. The dragons already knew. They had always known. They were just waiting for the right moment. Today, you are going to discover 3 things that will completely change how you see this story. First, why the most powerful people in the kingdom feared a stable boy. Second, what the ancient dragons sensed that no human could explain. And third, what happened when hiding him became impossible. No slow build-up. No wasted time. Let me show you exactly how this happened. His name was Kale. Nobody important. Nobody special. That is what everyone said. He woke up every morning before the sun came up. He grabbed his wooden bucket and his worn-out brush. He walked through the cold mud to the royal stables on the edge of Ashford Castle. He did not complain. He never complained. Because complaining was something people with choices did, and Kale had no choices. He had been brought to the castle at age 5. Nobody told him why. Nobody told him where his parents were. One day he was in a small village outside the northern walls of the kingdom. The next day he was here, sleeping in a pile of hay, learning how to muck out horse stalls before breakfast. The stable master was a wide man named Boris. Big shoulders, small eyes. He had a voice like gravel being dragged across stone. He did not like Kale. He never said why. But every morning when Kale arrived, Boris would look at him with that narrow, squinting stare, like Kale was something that did not belong there. Like Kale was something that made him uncomfortable just by existing. Kale learned to stay small. Keep his head down. Do his work. Do not speak unless spoken to. Do not stand out. Do not ask questions. He was very good at all of those things. The royal stables held 40 horses. 18 of them belonged to the king's cavalry. 6 belonged to the noble lords who visited twice a year. The rest were working animals, thick-legged draft horses used to pull supply wagons through the mountain roads east of the kingdom. Kale knew every single one of them by name. He knew which ones were nervous in thunderstorms. He knew which ones needed extra grain on cold mornings. He knew which old mare in stall 12 had a sore left knee that nobody else had noticed yet. He noticed things. That was one of his problems. People who notice things ask questions, and questions made Boris angry. But there was one thing Kale had never been allowed near. One place on the entire castle grounds that was completely forbidden to him specifically. Not to the other stable hands. Not to the kitchen boys or the courier runners, or even the younger pages who were always sneaking into places they should not be. Just Kale. The Dragon Quarter. It sat on the far eastern edge of the castle grounds. A massive stone structure. Ancient. Older than the castle itself by several hundred years, according to what Kale had overheard from the older servants. The walls were black, not painted black. Actually black, like the stone itself had been burned from the inside at some point long ago. 3 dragons lived there. Enormous creatures. Old beyond measure. The kingdom used them for border patrol and for war negotiations, because no neighboring kingdom wanted to sit across a treaty table from a nation that owned ancient dragons. Their names were Voreth, Serath, and the oldest one, simply called the Grey. Kale had never seen them up close. He had seen their silhouettes against the sky sometimes, massive and slow and breathtaking, when they returned from patrol runs at dusk. He had heard their sounds at night, low rumbling vibrations that passed through the stone floors of the stable and up through the soles of his boots. Not roars, not the angry fire-breathing sounds from the old stories. Something much quieter, much more deliberate, like they were communicating. He had asked Boris about it once. Just once. He was 11 years old. Boris had grabbed him by the collar so fast that Kale barely saw it happen. Pulled him up to eye level, those small eyes burning with something that was not just anger. Something closer to fear. "You do not go near that quarter," Boris had said. "You do not look at it. You do not think about it. You are a stable boy. You clean what you are told to clean and nothing else. Do you understand me?" Kale had nodded. Boris had set him down and walked away without another word. That night, Kale lay in his hay and stared at the ceiling for a long time. He understood perfectly, which meant he had absolutely no intention of listening. It happened on a Tuesday. Kale had learned that the Dragon Quarter Guard changed shifts at exactly 2 hours past midnight. There was always a small gap, about 4 minutes, between when the night guard left and when the early morning guard arrived. 4 minutes was not much, but for someone who had spent his entire life learning to move quietly and take up as little space as possible, 4 minutes was more than enough. He had watched the schedule for 3 weeks before he moved. The night was cold. A thin layer of frost covered the cobblestones of the east courtyard. Kale wore his thickest work shirt and kept close to the wall as he crossed the open ground between the main stables and the Dragon Quarter entrance. No torch, no lantern. He moved by the pale light of a half-moon and the faint glow coming from somewhere deep inside the stone structure ahead of him. The entrance was a massive archway, wide enough to drive 2 wagons through side by side. There were no doors, just the archway and the darkness beyond it, and that soft amber glow pulsing from somewhere inside. He stepped through. The heat hit him first. Not uncomfortable heat. Not the kind of heat that burns. The kind of heat that settles around you like a blanket on a winter night. Warm and deep and strangely familiar, like remembering something from a dream you cannot quite name. He walked deeper. The corridor was wide and tall. The walls curved slightly inward at the top. Torches lined the sides in iron brackets, but they were not lit. The light was coming from somewhere else. From ahead of him. From the main chamber. He turned the corner and stopped breathing. The main chamber was enormous. 3 separate enclosures cut into the rock, each one big enough to fit the entire royal stables with room left over. 2 of them were empty. Vorith and Sareth were out on patrol. Kale had seen them leave at dusk. But the 3rd enclosure was not empty. The gray was there. Kale had expected something terrifying, something monstrous and sharp and violent. Every story he had ever heard described dragons as weapons, massive destructive forces of nature, that the kingdom controlled through some ancient magical binding agreement that nobody fully understood. What he saw was not a weapon. The gray was ancient in a way that went beyond just size or age. The creature's scales were the color of weathered stone, silver gray and deep blue-gray layered together, each one the size of a dinner plate, overlapping with absolute precision. The dragon lay in a resting position, enormous head lowered onto crossed forearms, eyes closed. Its breathing was slow and steady, each exhale sending a gentle wave of warm air through the chamber. It was beautiful. Kale stood there for what felt like a very long time. He did not move. He barely breathed. He did not fully understand why he had come here. He had told himself it was curiosity. But standing here now, he realized that was not quite right. It felt like coming home. That was the thought that came to him without warning. Standing in an ancient stone chamber in the middle of the night, looking at the oldest living creature in the kingdom, it felt more like home than his hay pile in the corner of stall 8 had ever felt in 12 years. Then the gray opened one eye. It was gold. Deep molten gold with a dark vertical pupil that adjusted instantly to the light and focused, with absolutely no confusion or searching, directly on Kale. Not on the archway. Not on the corridor. Not scanning the room. Directly on Kale. Like it had known he was standing there the entire time. Like it had been waiting. The dragon did not move. It did not make a sound. It simply looked at him with that one enormous golden eye, calm and ancient and completely unsurprised. And then slowly, deliberately, it lowered its head. Not a threat. Not an attack. A bow. Kale felt the cold stone floor against his knees before he even realized he had collapsed. The next morning, everything looked the same. Boris shouted at him for being slow with the water buckets. The horses needed feeding. The east stall drainage had clogged again. The head cook complained that the hay cart had blocked the kitchen entrance for the third time that week. Everything was exactly the same as it always was. Except Kale was not. He moved through his morning tasks with his hands and let his mind stay somewhere else entirely. He kept coming back to the same single image. That enormous golden eye. The complete and total calm in it. No fear. No aggression. No uncertainty. Just recognition. Like meeting someone for the second time and realizing you had both been thinking about the other in the days between. He did not go back to the Dragon Quarter that night. Or the next. He was not afraid, which surprised him. He simply understood on some level that rushing was wrong. That whatever had just begun had its own pace, and he needed to respect that. 3 days later, while Kale was replacing rotted planks on the third stall's gate, one of the castle's senior dragon handlers walked past the stable entrance. His name was Commander Aldrich. He ran all dragon operations for the kingdom. Tall-manned, sharp eyes, the kind of person who walked through a room and people immediately stopped what they were doing. He stopped at the stable entrance. He looked directly at Kale. Then he kept walking. It lasted less than 3 seconds, but Kale felt it like a stone dropping into still water. The ripples went outward and did not stop, because the way Aldrich had looked at him was not the way a senior official looks at a stable hand he has never thought about before. It was the way someone looks at a problem they thought they had already solved. Kale said nothing, did nothing, replaced the last plank and went on with his day. But that night he went back to the Dragon Quarter. This time the Grey was awake and waiting. Head lifted, both eyes open, that deep gold gaze fixed on the archway before Kale had even stepped through it. Kale walked to within 10 feet of the enclosure gate and sat down cross-legged on the stone floor. The Grey watched him. Kale watched back. He did not know how long they stayed that way, but at some point something shifted inside his chest, a strange loosening, like a knot untying itself slowly. And with that loosening came something else. Images, not like dreaming, clearer than that, more deliberate, scenes that came in sequence like pages turning. A valley he had never seen, green and wide with a river cutting through its center, mountains in the distance with snow on their peaks even in summer. A woman standing at the edge of that river, dark hair, strong build, looking at the sky. A fire, but not a destructive fire. A fire that rose in a controlled column from the ground in the center of the valley and burned gold and white and did not consume anything around it. And then 2 words, not spoken aloud, not in any language Kale could name, but understood completely and instantly the way you understand your own name. Come home. Kale blinked. The stone chamber came back around him. The Grey was still watching him, patient and still and absolutely certain. What are you showing me? Kale whispered. The dragon blinked once, slow and deliberate. Then Vorith and Sarath came through the main entrance behind Kale, returning from their patrol run, massive wings folding as they entered, and both of them, without pausing, without any hesitation at all, lowered their heads toward the stable boy sitting cross-legged on the floor. 3 ancient dragons. One overlooked stable boy. And somewhere deep in the castle above him, a door opened. Boots hit stone floors. Voices went sharp and urgent. Commander Aldrich had been watching through the observation window. And now he was running. They came for him at dawn. Not Boris this time. 4 soldiers in full armor. Castle guard insignia on their shoulders. The kind of men who did not explain themselves because they did not have to. They walked into the stable, went directly to stall 8, and pulled Kale out of his hay pile before the sun had cleared the eastern wall. Boris stood near the entrance and watched. He did not say anything. He did not look surprised. He looked like a man who had been expecting this day for a very long time and had decided somewhere along the way to simply stop dreading it. They brought Kale to a room he had never seen before. Deep inside the castle, below the main hall. Stone walls. No windows. A single long table with 3 chairs on one side and 1 chair on the other. Oil lamps burning on iron stands in each corner. Commander Aldrich was already seated. Beside him was a woman Kale did not recognize. Older, gray-streaked hair pulled back tightly. Eyes that moved the way experienced people's eyes move, taking in everything at once. Cataloging it, filing it. She wore no armor, no uniform, just plain dark clothing and a small circular pin on her left collar that Kale could not identify. The 3rd chair was empty. Kale sat in the single chair across from them. Nobody spoke for a long moment. Then Aldrich leaned forward. His voice was controlled and flat and careful in the way that voices are when the person using them is managing something stronger underneath. How many times have you been in the Dragon Quarter? Twice, Kale said. The woman wrote something down. Did the Grey communicate with you? Kale considered the question. He thought about the images. The valley. The woman at the river. The golden fire. The 2 words that were not quite words. I am not sure what to call it, he said honestly. Aldrich studied him for a long moment. Did the other 2 bow to you? Yes. The woman stopped writing. She looked up. Aldrich sat back in his chair slowly. He pressed his fingers together in front of his mouth and stared at the table between them for what felt like a very long time. How old are you? He asked finally. 17. Another silence. Then Aldrich looked at the woman beside him, and Kale caught something in that look. Not just concern. Something older than concern. Something that had been carried for a long time and was becoming very heavy. We should have moved him sooner, the woman said quietly. We could not risk. It did not matter, she cut him off. It never mattered. The dragons were always going to find him. You cannot hide a signal from the things designed to receive it. Kale looked between them. Hide me from what? What signal? What am I? Aldrich looked at him then. Really looked at him, with the kind of directness that people usually reserve for moments when pretending is no longer an option. Your mother was not from this kingdom, Aldrich said. She was from the valley settlements east of the Dragon Spine Mountains. Her people, the Verk, were the original dragon binders. Not through magic. Not through force or contracts, he paused. Through bloodline. The dragons do not obey them. They recognize them. It is completely different. Kale felt something very still settle inside him. Like the answer to a question he had been carrying his whole life had just arrived, and it was larger than he had expected. Where is she? He asked. My mother's. The woman across the table set her pen down carefully. She looked at him with an expression that was not quite pity and not quite grief, but lived in the space between them. She sent you here to keep you safe, she said, because someone found out what you were, and that person has been looking for you ever since. The room was very quiet. "Who?" Kale asked. Aldrich looked toward the door, then back at Kale. "The king," he said. The truth came out in pieces, like a wall being dismantled brick by brick, until suddenly there was nothing left between Kale and the open air on the other side. The king, King Draveth III, had known about the Verk bloodline for over 20 years. He had known that the dragon binders still existed. He had known that as long as even one of them lived, the dragons did not truly belong to the kingdom. They belonged to whoever carried the blood. And Draveth was a man who did not share ownership of anything. He had sent soldiers to the valley settlements 17 years ago. That was the part that hit Kale hardest. Not a historical event. Not something vague and distant. 17 years ago, the same year Kale was born, soldiers had ridden east into the Dragon Spine settlements with very clear orders. Leave no binders alive. His mother had gotten him out before they arrived. She had handed him to traveling merchant with instructions and a small sealed letter, and watched her 5-year-old son disappear down a road heading west. Kale did not ask what happened to her after that. He did not need to. He could read it clearly enough in the silence that came after the woman across the table stopped speaking. He sat with that for a long moment. Then he stood up. "Where are you going?" Aldrich asked sharply. "To the Dragon Quarter," Kale said. "You cannot go there right now. The king has been told about last night. He is already." "I know," Kale said. He looked at Aldrich steadily. "How long do I have before his men come?" Aldrich's jaw tightened. He looked like a man making a decision he had been putting off for a very long time. "In hours. Maybe less." Kale nodded. That was enough. He walked out of the room. The 4 soldiers at the door did not stop him. He did not know why. Maybe Aldrich had signaled them. Maybe they simply understood that stopping him was no longer a real option. He walked through the castle, up from the lower levels, through the main hall, out into the east courtyard, into the morning light that was just beginning to break gold across the stone walls, across the courtyard to the Dragon Quarter archway. All 3 dragons were standing when he entered. Not resting, not patrolling, standing fully upright, in a way that made the enormous chamber feel both larger and smaller at the same time. Voreth's crimson scales caught the morning light flooding through the high ventilation shafts. Sarath's deep blue scales shifted and shimmered. And the gray stood at the center, massive and still and absolutely certain, the same way it had been the first night Kale had seen it. He walked to the center of the chamber and stopped. The gray lowered its head. Then Voreth. Then Sarath. 3 ancient dragons. 3 bows. 1 stable boy standing in the middle of it, all in a worn work shirt with hay still in his hair. He felt the images come again. The valley. The river. The golden fire. But clearer this time. Closer. More urgent. And underneath them, a feeling. Not words. Something older than words. "You are not hidden anymore." Behind him, he heard boots entering the archway. Soldiers. Many of them. He did not turn around. He heard them stop. He heard the silence that followed when they saw what was in front of them. And then he heard something he had never heard before, a sound that started low and deep in the gray's chest and rose slowly. Joined by Voreth, joined by Sarath, a resonant harmonic that was not a roar and not a call, but something that every person in that chamber understood on a level below thought. A declaration. "This one is ours." The soldiers did not advance. Kale stood in the light, coming through the ventilation shafts above him, and felt 17 years of hiding fall away like ash. He was not a stable boy anymore. He had never been just a stable boy. And everyone in that chamber, human and dragon alike, now knew it. Here is the part nobody talks about. The king never sent those soldiers because he feared the dragons. He sent them because an ancient record, kept locked in the castle library for 300 years, described exactly what happens when a true Verk binder comes of age. The dragons do not just recognize them. They transfer something, a portion of their accumulated knowledge, their memory, their power. The Verk do not control dragons. They become something the dragons and humans together have never produced before. The king was not trying to protect his kingdom. He was trying to protect himself from the thing Kale was always going to become. And by hiding Kale, by keeping him small and invisible and buried in a stable, he had actually given him the one thing a Verk needs most to come into their full power. Patience. If this opened your eyes, you are not going to want to miss what comes next. Let us bring it all together. A boy hidden from the creatures designed to find him. A kingdom built on a stolen power it never rightfully owned. And a truth that 17 years of silence could not stop from arriving. 3 things to remember from this story. 1. The people who try hardest to keep you small are usually the ones most threatened by what you can become. 2. The things meant for you will find you, no matter how many walls are built between you and them. 3. Patience is not weakness. Sometimes it is the most powerful thing you can carry. If this story hit you the way it hit me, hit that like button right now. It takes 1 second, and it helps this channel more than you know. Subscribe and turn on notifications, because the next story in this series picks up where Kale's journey is only just beginning, and you do not want to come in cold on that one. Now here is a question for you. Drop it in the comments below. If you had been hidden your whole life, and suddenly 3 ancient dragons bowed to you, what would be the first thing you would do? Tell me below. Every single comment gets read.